Uh, let's talk about some other stuff too. Man, yesterday was a doozy. Yesterday, Ian is dropping some bombs over here in these streets on Twitter and in his articles. It was getting a little bit spicy, and I was reading this like I can't believe what I'm reading. It almost seems Gotham calling me, but he does it. It's funny because Ian does it in his Ian way, where he's like, I can't tell you for sure if this is the case, but this is what I heard. Is that right? So I love the way Ian reports it. But so if you guys haven't heard, Cam Reddish, you already guys know Cam Reddish hasn't really touched the floor for the Knicks in a long time. And Ian Begley's reported that Cam Reddish had an issue with the way Tom Thibodeau was using him. He reached out to an assistant coach, and ever since then, coincidentally, he hasn't played a game since then, and he hasn't even played in garbage time, which is interesting to me. And me personally, I get a lot of hate for doing this online, but I do feel like a lot of Knicks fans overrate Cam Reddish. Dexter, you don't have to say anything out loud, Dexter. I want you to still have fans. People hate me already for saying that, but we actually went on an 8-game winning streak since he's been benched, right? But I will say this: if it is indeed that he hasn't got any playing time just because he expressed displeasure with his role, if that's the reason why he hasn't gotten playing time, then the biggest brother tips, because there's definitely times where even though I felt like we went on a winning streak without Cam Reddish, there was definitely times, and the Spurs game really sticks out to me, where we only had 7 guys. We were getting killed by long winged offensive plays by the Spurs, and we needed a long wing to combat that. And we just kind of overran our players. And if Thibs didn't play him because he was displeased with that, then dude, come on, man, grow up. He's 60 something. I hope that's not the case. That just sounds ridiculous, though, man. Dexter, man, tell me something.
I would say, this is what I will say. I would tell people it sounds ridiculous. It sounds petty as hell.
Yeah.
And it probably is. But considering some things that I had heard before the season started, okay? I said this on another show, so I'll say it here. I had heard from people that know that, and this has been reported too, that Thibs was not really a big fan of Cam. And I know that he really wasn't before the season and would have liked to have seen him off the roster. Now, it's funny. I was talking to somebody else about this, JL. And it was right before, it was maybe a little bit before the Knicks were on that streak, and then they'd had the loss in Dallas, which was absolutely terrible, in San Antonio. And yes, I know, Lee, you were at the game. You had messaged me after that.
Yes, Lee. You was getting booed.
Lee let me know he was feeling the pain. And I thought the same thing as you, JL, when they did not play him in that San Antonio game. I was like, oh, it's a wrap for dude, right? Like this is not happening anymore. Exactly what you said. If you don't, this is what I'll say, and I'm not saying this with any definitiveness or reporting on this at all whatsoever. So I don't want to say that, but I can tell you I know Thibs is not a fan of Cam Reddish, especially particularly his defensive effort. But you think with coaching, you want to do what's best to win, right? So if you need the bodies, you think you're going to play them. And I understand all that, whatever. I also do tend to agree with Jay Ellis here that I do think Knicks Nation tends to overrate Cam Reddish a little bit, right? Like, he did play well. Now, do I think it was fair that when he had the bad defensive situations against Dallas, the home Dallas game, because obviously he didn't play in the road Dallas game, which is pretty much was the end for it was a wrap for him after that.
Mm-hmm.
Did he need to get benched or pulled? Fine. But I don't know how he didn't earn his way. It was the opportunity to put Grimes in the starting lineup. Grimes went to the starting lineup. He's never left the starting lineup at all whatsoever. But I think the point that I was going to make here is that what we have to look at with this, with Ian coming out and reporting this, and Ian doesn't report anything. I don't have to justify him as a reporter. He's a good friend and a great reporter. I've known him a long time. Nothing that's not true.
Absolutely.
This is Cam's camp coming out. The timing is very interesting, guys. This is Cam's camp coming out, knowing that now we're a week away, 8 days before the trade deadline. And let's put this out there because I want it to be known. I want off this team. I want off the ship. Y'all need to move me. Now, one of the interesting things that I thought Ian quoted from his camp was that he said that he's not interested in any DNPs. And to that, I was like, well, what are you going to do if they don't trade you? There's not much he can do at all whatsoever. But I think the Knicks, what I would say is they probably need to get him off the team because I foresaw this coming. If they didn't move him, and I've talked to other people about this, if they didn't move him, it's going to become contentious. He's going to become a malcontent. It's not energy you want around the team. The problem for the Knicks is you gave a first rounder for him. Everybody in the world knows he doesn't want to be there. Everybody also knows that you're trying to trade him. So you don't have much value. At this point, if the Knicks can get a second round pick back, they better consider themselves happy because I don't think there's much else they can do. And no, I'm going to be honest. Do I think Cam Reddish could help this team with bench scoring right now? Maybe he could, but I don't know if it would make that much of a difference, right? Like, I don't think Cam Reddish is saving this team in any way. It's a failed experiment. It's bad. Is Thibs probably being a little bit petty or a lot petty here? Yes. Is that probably a good look for your coach? No. But here we are. This is what it is. It's all ammunition more for Lee to hold up the fire tip side.
Let's go.
This is what Lee is going to do.
Yeah.
Right? Like this is what it's going to do. So it's a situation that I think is going to be resolved. I think Reddish gets moved. It wouldn't shock me if he ends up on the Lakers. It wouldn't shock me if he plays there. And I know Knicks fans will be sick to their stomach, but it wouldn't shock me. But the Knicks don't have much leverage here. I'm not also sure how much leverage Reddish has, but I think the Knicks probably want him off the team because it sounds like he's letting it be known this is a contentious situation. I don't want to be around it. We'll see how that unfolds.
Yeah. And him and OG, don't they have the same agency? So that's a bad look too.
Both Rich Paul clutch clients. You're right. You're right about that.
Yep. Mm-hmm. So that's not good at all. Go ahead, Ryan G. You go ahead, Ryan.
Yeah, so what I want to know is when Cam made those comments, was that before or after the Dallas game?
That's a great question.
Wait, you talking about the first Dallas game, Ryan?
No, the
second Dallas game.
I know why he's saying that too.
Yeah, because I'm saying if he made those comments before the Dallas game, maybe that explains his effort in the Dallas game, why he showed up and he didn't play good and he didn't play well at all, which eventually led to his benching. And yeah, Thibs is petty Pendergrass. He's petty LaBelle. But yeah, like the whole camp situation, like I agree with pretty much everything, Dexter said and pretty much everybody's been saying. I do think that there were certain times in the season where Cam could have gotten playing time. And if Cam really just said that he didn't like his role in the team, like I don't think that warrants benching somebody and not have them play at all.
Yeah.
You have a lot of players where in the league where I'm pretty sure they don't like their role in the team, and whether they voice it or not, but they still play though. They still contribute to the team regardless. So I really don't know the reasoning as to why he's being benched if he said that, but. At the end of the day, it's like, yeah, Cam needs to be moved. I mean, it really makes no sense for him to stay on the roster because he's not being used, and just having him there accumulate DMPs, like that really can't be, a good thing for the rapper within the locker room. I think guys like Rose, Fournier are probably more, they're more like. I guess they're more accepting, like they don't like the fact that they don't play, but they're not the guys that's going to really like mess up a locker room. You know what I mean? Like they're not going to really make a whole lot of noise where it's like, yeah, I'm not getting playing time. I want off this team. So, the fact that Cam's camp is making that kind of noise saying that, they don't like he doesn't like his role in the team and he doesn't want to be here. Like, yeah, that makes it essential on the Knicks to movement. You just have to bite the bullet.
I mean, if it's a personal thing, then I can see why it would make noise though, because like the Thibs not liking Cam narrative has been around since last year. So if that's actually true, and it's now I'm in my contract year and you're DNP me even when half the team is injured, I can't blame kid. And I'm saying that as a guy who's not the biggest Cam fan, but if I'm in that situation, I might do what Cam did. You know what I'm saying? It's like that's human nature.
I want to add one thing, because here's the thing too, right? Like, I think that the thing that probably annoys Thibs about this whole situation when I read Ian's quote on that is that Cam, remember in that quote, Cam went to one of the assistants to let the assistants know that he didn't like it. It's almost like he couldn't go talk to Thibs directly. So it makes you wonder two things, right? Either Cam didn't feel like he could speak to him straight up,
right?
Or it had been so contentious between them before that there was no opportunity for them to speak straight up. And either way, you got to look at when things are released and leaked and all this stuff and how this goes. It's also trying to make Thibs look bad in this situation. And I'm kind of with you on this, Jay Ellis, on this too, right? It's the only card that Cam can play here, right? Like, you might not like it, you might not like the way you went about it or whatever it may be, but it's the only card he can play. And it's like he's trying to get PT and get somewhere else where he's trying to go. So this is the card you could play when you're 8 days away from the trade deadline, and it is what it is.
It's contract year. Like, now that's dead. So it's like, don't get me out of here.
Right.
Get me out of here.
I think there's blame on all three parties. Cam Reddish is definitely overrated. I've been harsh on Thibs' handling of this situation, but that doesn't mean that Cam Reddish has not given consistent effort on defense or played within whatever system Thibs is running consistently on offense either. I think he's been kind of like looking after his own stats for the most part and playing a lot of ISO ball when he was out there early in the season. So I'm not like, let's keep Cam at all costs. Let's give him 25 minutes a game. I'm not on that boat, but I do think there's been some heavy pettiness on Thibs' side, and we're stuck in a time loop. This isn't the first time that Thibs has done this. Thibs did this in Minnesota with Zach LaVine, with Jimmy Butler. He has a history of rubbing guys the wrong way because he's always been his way or the highway on defense, on offense, and rotations. I mean, I got a quote here. This is from Taj Gibson, his right-hand man, his number one intern. He's like a kid playing 2K. He's always raging no matter what. He's raging throughout the whole game. He doesn't care. He's always on you, good or bad. He's on you. You just got to block him out sometimes. That's Taj Gibson, bro. Been with him with all three stops. This man is a petty 13-year-old going through puberty, getting in field for the very first time. This is who he is. This is who he's going to be. He's 65 years old, been coaching for 15 years. He should be a defensive expert as an assistant coach, not a head coach. Man has a 3-year timetable, and he's hit an expiration date. I'm just saying. I'm just giving you the facts. I also think it's on Leon Rose for going after a guy he knew didn't fit his best friend's game plan and depreciating a first-round pick in order to get him. There needs to be some blame on Leon Rose for even getting Cam Reddish in the first place, knowing he didn't fit, knowing Thibs didn't want him. Is there not communication back and forth between those two boomers on who they want on the team and who they don't? Come on, man. Like, there needs to be better communication and more transparent communication with the players that you're bringing in through trades, free agency, and draft.
That's fair. That's 100% fair. All good points, Lee.
Pick a lob, slam dunk that.
It's like, but even if I'm Leon Rose, right? I have Kevin Knox here who hasn't worked out. I have a first round pick who's heavily protected. I'm not giving Kevin Knox any bread. I don't blame him for making that move and kicking the can down the road and bringing a guy here who has upside and people around the league thinks that. Like, I feel like as a front office, if even knowing what I know today, if faced with that same decision as a front office last year, like, it still makes sense to me, but it's like, but I don't know. It's like, but Tom gotta Thibs be tibbing, man. Thibs be do.
Enough said.
Yeah, but here's the thing though. Like, I understand the whole thing with Kevin Knox and, having him, moving him somewhere else to where, he can get playing time elsewhere and bringing in somebody that Thibs could possibly use to, to get playing time to improve the team. But I think at the same time, like, I'm a firm believer in as a front office, you build the team, you bring in players through trades, you sign free agents or whatever the case may be to improve the roster. But I think at the same time, like, I feel like the front office should be on the same. They should at least, have a rapport with the coach as well. You should know what kind of players your coach wants, what kind of players your coach is going to play. Players fit that coach's system or whatever the case may be. So it's like, as a front office, you can't just make a trade and be like, okay, we're going to bring this player in and not even consult with the coach, whether that player is going, if he's okay with that player being on the roster and if he fits his system or whatever the case may be. Like, there has to be at least some line of communication, before you make a move like that and be like, okay, like, at least go up to Thibs and be like, all right, we're thinking about bringing in this player. Is this a player that fits the system? Is this a player that you're going to use and play? You know what I mean?
I have mixed feelings. About that. Because Thibs got fired from the Timberwolves because he was the GM. So do I really just want to bring every single player that Tom wants to bring in? Like, are we still trying to bring back Reggie Bullock because Tom Thibodeau likes him? No. Like, I don't know, man. Like, this is a team sport. This is a whole team. It's not Tom's way or the highway. I get both sides, man. Like, but I don't know.
That's the thing, right, Jay Ellis, right? I think this is a interesting point for the Knicks team and fan base and everything, because this shows you why coaching matters. I was just talking about this on the show the other day. Coaching matters, and also the way what Ryan's talking about and Lee is also talking about, the way the front office and the coaches work together, right? Like, everybody's got to, you're not always going to agree, but you got to try to be on the same page, and have the same vision of what you're trying to get to. And I think it's fair for some people to look at the Knicks and question, what is exactly that vision, right? Like, what is it they're trying to do? What kind of team they're trying to build? And where I am with Thibs, I am not as far as Lee, right? Like, I'm not on the holding up the fire Thibs sign, but I do think I'm at the point now where I'm looking at this Knicks team, and you look at the issues, the offensive issues, forget the Cam stuff, but you look at the offensive issues, and I'm like, okay, maybe Thibs has done his job here. Maybe he's come in, he's changed the culture, which has been good. He's got them to the play. He's got them to, if this year to make the playoffs is 2 out of 3 years, this is much better than Knicks fans have seen in pretty much the last 10 to 15 years, okay? He's done that, but now it's time for another voice to take them to another level, to bring the things that they can do offensively and defensively. Somebody could come in and say, this is who we're going to play. We're going to invest into these young players. This is our core.
Yeah.
Obi's going to make sure he gets his minutes, right? Because I'm actually sick and tired of having a conversation with Knicks fans why Obi doesn't get more minutes and all this other stuff. I think what Knicks fans want is, what is the direction of the team, right? Like, where they're going. They do have an identity. I don't want to say they don't. This is a hard, scrappy team that people don't want to play, and I like how they play. Right, especially all of us who grew up in the 90s watching Knicks, you're going to like the way they play a little bit to some degree. But the offense can't look like it's the 90s, and that's part of the problem, right? Things have to change with that. And I wonder I don't know how you guys feel about it, but I wonder if it's time for a new voice. And Ime Udoka is out there waiting without a job, and I would not mind if the Knicks went and hired him. I think that would not be a bad move at all.
I knew I loved you, Dexter. Twins, bruh.
Dexter, this has been.
I'm not holding up the 5 tip sign.
This has been a topic of conversation here for the last maybe month. I will say this: I'm moving closer to Lee's side this week because of the last couple of games. The last game specifically with the Julius Randle ISO on the right side of the ball. Today's win might have bought my headspace a little bit more time. But I've always said with Lee that I already knew for the future Tom Thibodeau isn't going to be the coach to bring us to the promised land because of his inadequacies as a guy who can adjust on the fly and be like an offensive coach. But he is what he is, right? He's a culture setter. He set our culture on the right trajectory. And for us, I always felt like if we can get to the playoffs with this coach and have this look of a pristine franchise, we'll be that much closer to bringing in an all-star because we look like a stable franchise. And then we can switch out the coach maybe a year next year or so. So that's why I always was like, I know he's not going to coach. He's not the coach of the future for me. But maybe if we just hold on and keep progressing in the right direction, then we'll be fine. And it was easier to say that when you're on an 8-game winning streak, seeing some of these problems, you know?
Right. No, I feel you on that, but I think that's not a crazy thought or thinking, right? Like, I'm not on the let's fire Thibs tomorrow, situation. I'm not really on that, but I just wonder if at the end of year 3, we've kind of run the course that we've got there, especially they make the playoffs 2 years in a row, like they said, or they are competitive in the playoffs this year. Like you said, Jonathan, I think it's that. I'm just wondering, are we approaching this time? And I was probably more on the other side of where Lee was and being like, no, I'm on the Thibs train. Like, I think he could get it done. I didn't mind the hire when they made it, but I think I was kind of like you, Jonathan, where it was just, I know what this is. So in a weird way, I'm not that mad at it. Like, I understand what it is. It's just the scary thing is, and I wonder if this is what happens with Lee, is that you hope that the organization and team, they don't try to go too far down the road and they're like, oh man, let's squeeze another year out of this. Sometimes you got to recognize when something is what it is, and you are where you are, or it might be a sunk cost or whatever you want to call it. And this is just it. But now we got to try to get it to the next level. I know we don't want to talk about the Nets here, but even the Nets recognized that recently with Steve Nash and Jacques Vaughn. And we've seen the impact that Jacques Vaughn has had on changing the culture in that team. And probably, I don't know if they'll get to the next level because they're a head case, but maybe changing that in that way. Sometimes you have to look and say, you know what? This ain't it.
Yeah.
This is good, but we need to do better. We look competent, but we need to be better.
Yeah. I mean, and it's easy to recognize with the Nets because if you have Kevin Durant and freaking Kyrie Irving, you shouldn't be like 1-20, So it's it's very obvious with the Nets. With us, it's like, okay, he wasn't the first option on his team. Julius Randle wasn't the guy last year. We don't have a quote unquote superstar here. So it's harder to say if it's coaching. Now we know it's some coaching problems are happening, but it's harder to say talent versus coaching, which is a bigger piece of the blame pie, is what I'll say.
Listen, I think when you look at it, like, I think what you have to ask yourself is he getting the most he can out of this team? It's fair if somebody wants to say no, because you could look at the Knicks games and say there's probably, I could say 3 to 4 games they legitimately should have won extra that because they blew or didn't close it out in crunch time, right? We could say that. But does Thibs probably have this team talent-wise right around what they should be? Yeah, he does. He's not a terrible coach. And I don't think we should be Debbie Downers because, look, the Knicks are 3 games over 500. They just ended the 2-game skid. They beat the Heat. They're not in a bad spot. That was a big game for them beating the Heat because they're ahead of them in the standings. They're not in a bad spot. This is a team that can finish top 6 in the playoffs. I think they can win 43, 44 games. I think that's possible. All things I thought before the season. So at the end of the day, I'm not really, I don't think you could look at the Knicks and say they're in a bad spot. They still have a lot of picks. They're in the middle, but they have options with their picks and things they have. I think it's just about how they make the moves, what moves they make, and also what they decide to do with coaching, because I think that's part of the moves too, and getting the front office and coaching staff aligned together, like myself, Ryan, and Lee were all saying. I think all that stuff matters, but I don't think the Knicks are in a bad spot.
Me neither.
I think fans should actually look at this and say, yo, this team is way more competent than they've been in a long time. Like, when's the last time we really talked about some scandals or ridiculousness with the Knicks or anything like that? The worst thing last year was like Julius Randle going like this. That was the worst thing we saw last year. If that is the low of Knick problems, which shows you how low they were before, it's a lot better situation now. It's not that bad. That's all I'm saying.
Listen,
I see people in the chat that are being like, "Oh, why y'all angry after a win?" I think it's healthy to be objective. And Ryan, I know Ryan feels the same way. To give proper due and credence to the good and the bad of every element of our team, from the ownership to front office, coaching, and players on down. I also think this is not 7 years ago, where it was David Fisdale, Derek Fisher, Jeff Hornacek. These are objectively bad coaches, people who should not be given a job, and I would put Steve Nash in the same category, to ever coach a professional basketball team as the head of the snake, ever. Like, I remember yelling, scream Derek Fisher in my grungy, nasty apartment to my roaches and the rats that were hanging out on the wall. I was dead broke. They were the only people who listened to me. So I live in Dallas. There's no things over here besides my pops. So the roaches were like, what the hell is this guy talking about? But I wanted him gone because I felt like he wasn't a good high basketball IQ, competent tactician. Tom Thibodeau, I don't feel that way about. Tom Thibodeau is an above average coach who has marked and measured success, come into bad teams, not just bad teams, desperate franchises, taking them out of the sewer and the gutter and making them respectable. He did it with Chicago, post Jordan, he did it with Minnesota, post Kevin Love, and he did it now with the Knicks.
Yeah.
Post David Fizdale, Steve Mills, and KP. He did it. But it's also okay and healthy to project into the future and say, well, if we did have an SGA or we had a Anthony Edwards, could the Thibs take that centerpiece now and the supporting cast we have and win a championship with it? And when I look at all the evidence that it isn't statistically, I say, hell no. Yeah. And I get even more frustrated when I look at the trades, because I really think Leon Rose has given draft control to probably World Wide West and Walt Perrin. I really believe they're the ones making the calls on the draft. I think Thibs really focuses on trades and free agent signings. I might be wrong. This is all speculation, but I think he's done a pretty bad job outside of Brunson in bringing in guys that Thibs can use. Derrick Rose might be the exception, but Albert Burks, Nerlens Noel, those re-signings didn't work out. Kemba Walker, Evan Fournier, Cam Reddish, those didn't work out. There needs to be better unison. You would think the two best friends like Thibs and Leon would have better synergy, working together and communicating to building a roster that made sense for all parties involved. And they haven't. And to me, that's an issue. And I also worry about Leon Rose ever firing this guy because they're also best friends and the optics would be awful to fire your splashes higher. I say this every opportunity I can. He will play out his 5-year contract.
Well, that's not gonna make you happy.
I liked Alec Burks.
Yeah, no.
I liked
Burks wasn't good for us though.
Burks was a good signing. It just went bad when Thibs started to use him as a point guard.
Yeah,
Exactly.
but I still feel like Alec Burks was a good signing. That's just me.
In his normal position, like he was actually productive for the Knicks.
He was very productive. I just want IQ to play starting point guard last year instead of Alec Burks. Alec Burks should have just been a wing. But that's a whole other story. That's off of the tangent. I get the sentiment. And guys, we talked all the good stuff earlier on. The conversation has evolved since then. All right. But salute to the chat. Shout out to everybody. Let me get to these super chats because I was waiting for a nice time to break.